Hello everyone, here I am, your English friend, with another video to explain Part C of sample OET reading passage published on OET official website. So let's get started now. Question number 7. In the first paragraph, the writer uses E1 Carter's words too. Here the answer is B, and it says, reinforce a view about the impact of sleep deprivation. As we go through the paragraph, here in the first part, information regarding negative effects of sleep deprivation has been given. And as we read further in the middle portion in this line, you may see, in a research or in a study conducted, they say every variable was affected. Here in the last portion, E1 Carter also shares the same opinion. He says things go wrong every time we sleep deprive ourselves, and there is no part of the body which is not getting affected by sleep, according to E1 Carter. So we may understand that the writer uses E1 Carter's words to support, or in other words, to reinforce the idea about the impact or the effect of sleep deprivation which was found in this study. That's why option B is the answer in this case. Now option A says explain the main causes of sleep deprivation, which is clearly not given. In this paragraph, they have not mentioned, they have not given any information regarding the causes of sleep deprivation or why sleep deprivation occurs. So that's clearly not given. Option C says question some research findings about sleep deprivation. Here it is quite clear that E1 Carter also suggests the same thing which was found in the study. So nobody is really questioning any findings here. So the findings were supported by our writer by using the words delivered by E1 Carter. So option C is wrong. Option D, describe the challenges involved in sleep deprivation. Now, don't relate this option with the information given here. Almost every variable we measured was affected. This information is the finding of the study that they have carried out. Challenges involved in a sleep deprivation research mean lack of time that they had, or the lack of funds to carry out the research, and so on. So there is no information similar regarding similar kind of challenges mentioned anywhere in this paragraph. So that is also not given. Question number 8. What do we learn about sleep in the second paragraph? Here the answer is C, which says researchers have tended to confirm earlier ideas about its purpose. As we go through the paragraph, you may see a common refrain among sleep scientists about 2 decades ago was that the sleep was performed by the brain in the interest of the brain. So this was the common opinion of sleep scientists 2 decades back. So this was not a fully elaborated theory, but it was not wrong. Here they say numerous recent studies have hinted at the purpose of sleep by confirming that neurological and cognition are messed up during sleep loss. All these things like the neurological function, cognition, which are associated with brain, were messed up or affected when patients were sleep deprived, which gives the hint that the sleep is performed by the brain in the interest of the brain. Or in other words, you may say the purpose of the sleep is related to the brain. And that's why option C is the answer, which says researchers have hinted to confirm earlier idea. What is the earlier idea? Sleep was performed by the brain in the interest of the brain, about its purpose. So answer is C. Now option A says scientific opinion about its function has changed in the recent years. No, that has not changed, because 2 decades back, it was thought, sleep scientists thought that sleep was performed by the brain in the interest of the brain, and the same thing is actually getting confirmed by the numerous recent studies that have been conducted. So option A is wrong. Option B says there is now more controversy about it than there was in the past. There is no information regarding any controversy that occurred in the past or in the present. So that is not given clearly. Option D says studies undertaken in the past have formed the basis of current research. Again, no information. They're not talking about any current research, and they're not telling us that the previous studies that have been conducted in the past have become the platform for the latest researchers. So that's also not given. Question number 9. What particularly impressed Bo Macaulay of Harvard Medical School? Here the answer is C, which says simultaneous production of adenosine and adenosine receptors. As we go through the paragraph, we may see in 1997, Bo Macaulay and colleagues at Harvard Medical School found that when they kept cats awake by playing with them, a compound known as adenosine increased in the basal forebrain as the sleepy feline stayed up longer. As we read further, here we can see Macaulay's team also found that administering adenosine to the basal forebrain acted as a sedative, putting animals to sleep. It should come as no surprise that the caffeine, which blocks adenosine receptors, keeps us awake. Teaming up with Bashir and others, Macaulay later discovered that as adenosine levels rise during sleep deprivation, so do concentrations of adenosine receptors, magnifying the molecule's sleep-inducing effect. The brain has cleverly designed a two-stage defense against the consequences of sleep loss, Macaulay says. Here it is quite evident that Macaulay is quite excited about the brain's clever design of two-stage defense against the consequences of sleep loss. And to know what this two-stage defense is, you need to read from here again. Teaming up with Bashir discovered that as adenosine levels rise during sleep deprivation, so do concentrations of adenosine receptors. So this is this two-stage defense designed by brain to or against the consequences of sleep loss, which is the same thing that we can find in text C, in option C. The simultaneous production of adenosine and adenosine receptor. That's why this is the answer for question number 9. Now, question number S says the effectiveness of adenosine as a sedative. There is no information given anywhere in this paragraph here that the effectiveness of adenosine is impressing Bob Macaulay in any manner. So that cannot be the answer. Now, option B says the influence of caffeine on adenosine receptors. Here you can see that Macaulay's team also found that administering adenosine to basal forebrain acted as a sedative, putting animals to sleep. It should come as no surprise then that caffeine, which blocks adenosine receptors, keeps us awake. So this is not surprising Bob Macaulay. So this also cannot be the answer for question number 9. Now, option D says the extent to which adenosine levels fall when subjects are allowed to sleep. Again, this information is not clearly mentioned anywhere in this paragraph that this is impressing Bob Macaulay in any way. So that is also not the answer for the question. Question number 10. In the first paragraph, what idea is emphasized by the phrase, by no means be all and end all? Here the answer is A, which says sleep deprivation has consequences beyond its impact on adenosine levels. When we went through the same paragraph for question number 9, we learned that sleep deprivation has got its effect on the adenosine levels, as you can see here. The adenosine levels rise during sleep deprivation, so do concentration of adenosine receptors. When we read further, we may see that adenosine may underlie some of the cognitive deficits that may result from sleep loss. Some. Macaulay and colleagues found that infusing adenosine into rats' basal forebrain impaired their performance on an attention test similar to that seen in sleep-deprived humans. But adenosine levels are by no means the be-all and end-all of sleep deprivation's effects on the brain or the body. It means the effects on adenosine level is not the be-all and end-all, or in other words, not the utmost or not the ultimate effect that the sleep deprivation has got on human body. It has got effects beyond that, which is the same idea that we can find here in option A. Sleep deprivation has consequences beyond its impact on adenosine levels. Now, option B says adenosine levels are a significant factor in situations other than sleep deprivation. Here in this entire paragraph, there are no other situations other than sleep deprivation mentioned. So it's clearly not given. We don't have to think about it much. Option C, the role of adenosine as a response to sleep deprivation is not yet fully understood. Again, as far as we can understand from this paragraph, role of adenosine has quite been fully understood, and there is no information telling us that it has not been fully understood anywhere here. So that is also a wrong option. Option D says the importance of link between sleep deprivation and adenosine should not be underestimated. Nobody is underestimating this link anywhere in this paragraph. So that's another option which is not given. Question number 11. What was significant about the findings in Von Carter's experiment? Here the answer is D, and it says the extent of the contrast in the men's metabolic states between sleep debt and recovery. As we go through the paragraph from the very first line to this portion, they are describing the methodology and the way they conducted the exam and what exactly the experiment was. And here you will find the findings of that experiment conducted by Von Carter. Here it can be found that during sleep debt and recovery, researchers gave the participants a glucose tolerance and had found striking differences. While sleep deprived, the men's glucose metabolism resembled the pre-diabetic state. We knew it would be affected, says Von Carter. The big surprise was the effect being much greater than we thought. So here you may see that they already knew and they were expecting the glucose metabolism to get affected by sleep deprivation or during the sleep debt and recovery, but they were not expecting the difference to be so great. So the effect was much greater than they ever expected, that they ever anticipated, and that's why D is the answer. Here it says the extent of the contrast, or you may say the extent of the striking differences, contrast or differences, the extent of contrast in men's metabolic states between sleep debt and recovery. Here you may find during sleep debt and recovery, the extent of contrast or the extent of difference was really great and beyond what they were expecting. So that's why it's D. Now option A says the rate at which sleep deprived men entered a pre-diabetic state. No, that's not the answer, because it is not so significant that the rate at which sleep deprived men entered the pre-diabetic state. No, nothing is mentioned anywhere in this paragraph. So that's not the most significant thing about the findings in Von Carter's experiment. Option B, the fact that sleep deprivation had an influence on men's glucose level. This is also not significant because this is something which they were really expecting. So this is not the most significant about the findings. The differences. Option C says the differences between individual men with regard to their glucose tolerance. Again, another wrong option, because there is nothing about the differences between individual men mentioned anywhere in this paragraph. So that's not given. Question number 12. In the fifth paragraph, what does the word "it" refer to? So this is the fifth paragraph, and as we go through the paragraph, we can see that subsequent studies also found insulin resistance increased during bouts of sleep restriction, and in 2012, Von Carter's team observed impairments in insulin signaling in subjects' fat cells. Another recent study showed that sleep-restricted people will add 300 calories to their daily diet. Echoing Von Carter's results, Bashir has found evidence that enforced lack of sleep sends the brain into a catabolic or energy consuming state. This is because it degrades the energy molecule adenosine triphosphate to produce adenosine monophosphate, and this results in the activation of AMP kinase, an enzyme that boosts fatty acid synthesis and glucose utilization. So this all happens because of the enforced lack of sleep. And because of that, the brain is sent to a catabolic and energy consuming state. So here, the word "it" refers to enforced lack of sleep. Answer is D. Question number 13. What aspect of her findings surprised Chiara Shirelli? Here the answer is A, which says there was no reversal of a certain effect of sleep deprivation. As we go through the paragraph, here we may see Chiara Shirelli's team at the Madison School of Medicine in the USA found structural changes in the cortical neurons of mice when the animals are kept awake for long periods. So there were some structural changes. Specifically, Shirelli and colleagues saw signs in mitochondrial activation, which makes sense, as neurons need more energy to stay awake, she says. as well as unexpected changes such as undigested cellular debris, signs of cellular aging that are unusual in neurons of young healthy mice. The number was small, but it is worrisome because it's only 4 to 5 days of sleep deprivation, says Shirley. After 36 hours of sleep recovery, a period during which she expected normalcy to resume, those changes remained. So we can learn from the whole paragraph that there are some changes happening when the mice were kept sleep deprived. In the last part, in the last 2 lines, you may see that she really is expecting those changes to reverse and become normal during the sleep recovery period, but that didn't happen. Those changes remained. And this is what surprised her. In fact, surprise, the term surprise is meant to describe something that happens unexpectedly. So, answer for question number 13 is A. There was no reversal of certain effect of sleep deprivation. Option B says the cortical neurons of the mice underwent structural changes, which is true as per the paragraph, but this didn't surprise her. Here you may see they're talking about structural changes in cortical neurons, but this didn't surprise Chiara Shirley. That's why option B is not the answer. Option C says there was evidence of an increased need for energy in the brains of the mice. Here you can find neurons need more energy to stay awake. Again, something that didn't surprise Chiara Shirley. Last option, the neurological response to sleep deprivation only took a few hours to become apparent. Here you can see that the number was small. It's worrisome because it's only 4 to 5 days of sleep deprivation. So you may relate option D to this context here, even though it's not few hours, it took 4 to 5 days, but still that's not something which is surprising her in any manner. So option D is also not right. Now question number 14. In the final paragraph, the code from Von Cotter is used to suggest that. Here the answer is B, which says it could be difficult to develop any treatment for sleep deprivation. When we go through the paragraph, we can see further insights could be drawn from the study of shift workers and insomniacs who serve as natural experiments on how human body reacts to losing out on such a basic life need for chronic periods. But with so much of our physiology affected, an effective therapy other than sleep itself is hard to imagine. People like to define a clear pathway of action for health conditions, says Von Cotter. With sleep deprivation, everything you measure is affected and interacts synergistically to produce the effect. So from here it is quite clear that there is no effective therapy that could be put forth in order to treat or in order to handle the effects produced by sleep deprivation other than sleep itself. So answer B is the right one. It could be difficult to develop any treatment for sleep deprivation. Option A says the goals of sleep deprivation research are sometimes unclear. There is no such information given anywhere in this paragraph. The goals of sleep deprivation research are unclear, so that's clearly not given. Option C says opinions about the best way to deal with sleep deprivation are divided. No, that's not divided, because here you can see people like to define a clear pathway of action for health conditions, says Von Cotter. With sleep deprivation, everything you measure and so on. So here it is not divided. So option C is also wrong. Option D says there is still a great deal to be learned about the effects of sleep deprivation. Again, as per the final paragraph, clearly not given. Now question number 15 from the second text, ADHD. In the first paragraph, the writer questions whether, here the answer is D, cases of ADHD have genuinely increased in USA. So here you may find from the third line, in the recent years, the USA has seen a 40% rise in diagnosis of ADHD in children. It could be that the disorder is becoming more prevalent, or as seems more plausible, doctors are making the diagnosis more frequently. So here they're talking about a 40% rise in diagnosis of ADHD. So when somebody sees this particular rise, obviously everyone is gonna think that there is an increase of ADHD in the USA, but the writer is questioning, is this rise because of the more frequent diagnosis that the doctors are making, or Is it because the disorder is really becoming more prevalent? So this is the area where the writer is asking a question. So that is the reason why option D is the answer. Now option A says adult ADHD should have been recognized as a disorder at an earlier date. In the initial portion, we may find about the dates like American Psychiatric Association recognized attention deficit hyperactivity disorder as a childhood disorder in the 1960s, but it was not until 1978 that that condition was formally recognized as affecting adults. But there is no other area in this paragraph where the writer is questioning whether ADHD should have been recognized as a disorder at an earlier date. So option A cannot be the answer. Option B says ADHD should be diagnosed in the same way for children and adults. Not given, no information about B. C says ADHD can actually be indicated by neurological markers, and that's the wrong option, because here you may see the issue is complicated by the lack of any recognized neurological markers for ADHD. So option C is contradicting this information, which we can see in the first paragraph. Question number 16. What does Dr. Saul object to? When we go through the second paragraph, you may see that ADHD can be a controversial condition. Dr. Russell Barkley, professor of psychiatry at University of Massachusetts, insists the science is overwhelming. It's a real disorder which can be managed in many cases by using stimulant medication in combination with other treatments. Dr. Richard Saul, a behavioral neurologist with 5 decades of experience, disagrees. He says, many of us have difficulty with organization or details or tendency to lose things or to be forgetful or distracted. Under such a subjective criteria, the entire population could potentially qualify for having this disorder ADHD. Although some patients might need stimulants to function well in daily life, the lumping together of many vague and subjective symptoms could be causing a national phenomenon of misdiagnosis and overprescription of stimulants. So he is of the opinion that everyone has got some problems associated with organization or details or in generally speaking attention, which are similar to the symptoms that are considered for ADHD. So many people who don't have this disorder might be wrongly diagnosed and might be prescribed with stimulants if these vague and subjective symptoms are lumped together. Vague means unclear. Unclear and subjective symptoms are lumped together, which is the same idea that we can see here in text C, the grouping of imprecise symptoms into mental disorder. And from this area, it is quite clear that these symptoms are not precise or perfect. They are imprecise symptoms. And that's why option C is the right answer. Option A says, suggestion that Dr. Saul objects to the suggestion that people need stimulants to cope with everyday life. He is not objecting to that idea, because here you may say, although some patients might need stimulants to function well in the daily life, lumping together of many vague and subjective symptoms could be causing a national phenomenon. So he's not against or objecting to the need of stimulants to cope with everyday life of people. For people, he is just going against the grouping of imprecise symptoms. So option A is wrong. Option B says the implication that everybody has some symptoms of ADHD. No, he is not saying everybody has got the symptoms of ADHD, but people have got some kind of difficulties with organization and details, and these are pretty subjective and these are unclear symptoms. So we cannot really say what exactly are the symptoms, and we cannot group them, because these things that are considered as symptoms for ADHD is pretty common for many people. So option B is also wrong. Now option D, the treatment for ADHD suggested by Dr. Barkley, that can never be the answer. There is no objection from the side of Dr. Saul against the treatment for ADHD suggested by Dr. Barkley. He is just objecting the idea of grouping the imprecise symptoms. Question number 17. The writer regards the study of children in foster care as significant because here the answer is it highlights the difficulty of distinguishing ADHD from other conditions. As we go through the paragraph, you may see a recent study found children in foster care 3 times more likely than others to be diagnosed with ADHD. Researchers also found that children with ADHD in foster care were more likely to have another disorder such as depression or anxiety. This finding certainly reveals the need for medical and behavioral services for these children, but it could also prove the known specific nature of the symptoms of ADHD, anxiety and depression, or an altered state can easily be mistaken for manifestations of ADHD. So here it says it is quite clear that it is difficult to distinguish between ADHD and other conditions like the anxiety and depression. That's why option A is the right answer here. Option B says focuses on children known to have complex mental disorder. No, in the study of children in foster care, they're not specifically focusing on children to have other mental disorders. They're telling about all the children over there, and those children who have ADHD might be having, or they are more likely to have, depression or anxiety. They are not specifically concentrating on children who have some complex mental disorders. So option B is wrong. Option C says suggests a link between ADHD and child's upbringing. No, that cannot be the answer because they are not explaining any such link anywhere in this paragraph. Now D says draws attention to the poor care given to such children. No mentioning at all. Nothing regarding this option has been given in this paragraph. So that's totally not given. Question number 18. In the fourth paragraph, the word they refers to. Here the answer is C, and let's see how it becomes C. When we read the paragraph, you may see ADHD, the thinking begins in childhood. In fact, in order to be diagnosed with it as an adult, a patient must demonstrate that they had traits of conditions in childhood. However, studies from the UK and Brazil published in JAMA Psychiatry are fueling questions about the origins and trajectory of ADHD, suggesting not only that it can begin in adulthood, but that there may be two distinct syndromes, adult onset ADHD and childhood ADHD. They echo earlier research from New Zealand. However, an editorial by Dr. Stephen Farron in JAMA Psychiatry highlights potential flaws in the findings. So here you can find the term they. They echo earlier research from New Zealand. They are reflecting the earlier research from New Zealand. So what is this they? Yes, it's the studies from the UK and Brazil which says that there may be two distinct syndromes, adult onset ADHD and childhood ADHD. So these studies from the UK and Brazil are echoing earlier research from New Zealand. So answer for question number 18 is C. Question number 19. Dr. Farron suggests that the group of patients diagnosed with adult onset ADHD, here the answer is C, had mild undiagnosed ADHD in childhood. As we go through the paragraph, you may see, however, an editorial by Dr. Stephen Farron in JAMA Psychiatry highlights potential flaws in the findings. Among them, underestimating the persistence of ADHD into childhood and overestimating the prevalence of adult onset ADHD. In Dr. Farron's words, the researchers found a group of people who had subthreshold ADHD in their youth. They may have been signs in the things were not right, but not enough to go to a doctor. Perhaps these were smart kids with particularly supportive parents or teachers who helped them cope with attention problems. Such intellectual and social scaffolding will help in early life, but when the scaffolding is removed, full ADHD could develop. Which means those patients diagnosed with adult onset ADHD might have ADHD in their childhood, but was able to cope with the problems or with attention problems with the help of parents or teachers. When such kind of intellectual and social scaffolding are removed, ADHD could develop. So answer here C is right. Option C is right, which is had mild undiagnosed ADHD in childhood, because of the scaffolding or the help they get from that, they did get from the teachers or the parents. ADHD might be undiagnosed in childhood and they won't consider the signs to be enough to go to the doctor. So it remains undiagnosed. So that's why option C is the answer. Option A says, had teachers or patients who recognize the symptoms of ADHD? No, there is no such information that the teachers or parents have recognized the symptoms, but they are there to help these people with their attention problems. That's it. No information that these people were able to recognize the symptoms for ADHD. And we have got the information that the signs that things were not right were not considered as enough to go to a doctor. So option A is wrong. Option B says, should have consulted a doctor at a younger age. No, there is no such information that they should have gone to a doctor at the younger age. So no, that's not Farron suggest regarding the group of patients diagnosed with adult onset ADHD. Option D, were specially chosen by the researchers. Again, completely irrelevant. So here the answer is C. Now question number 20. In the fifth paragraph, it is suggested that drug companies have, option B, influenced research that led to reworking of ADHD diagnostic criteria. Here in this paragraph, fifth paragraph, we may see until this century, adult ADHD was a seldom diagnosed disorder. Nowadays, however, it's common in mainstream medicine in USA, a paradigm shift apparently driven by two factors. Reworked, many say less stringent diagnostic criteria introduced by APA in 2013, and marketing by manufacturers of ADHD medications. Some have suggested that this new broader definition of ADHD was fueled, at least in part, to broaden the market of medication. In many instances, the evidence preferred to expand the definitions came from studies funded in whole or part by manufacturers, or in other words, the drug manufacturers. And as the criteria for the condition loosened, reports emerged about clinicians involved in diagnosing ADHD receiving money from drug makers. So from this information, it is quite clear that drug companies have influenced the research. They were funding, partly or wholly, the studies were funded by them, by the manufacturers, and the clinicians involved in diagnosing ADHD were receiving money from the drug makers as well. So it resulted, or this shift, this paradigm shift apparently driven by two factors, and the first factor is reworked. So answer for question number 20 is obviously B. Drug companies have influenced the research by funding and by giving money to the clinicians involved in diagnosing ADHD that led to the reworking of ADHD diagnostic criteria. You may see criteria for the condition loosened. So that's why option B is the answer. Option A says, drug companies have been overly aggressive in their marketing ADHD medication. No, there is no information that they have been overly aggressive in their marketing, so that cannot be the answer. Option C says, drug companies are attempted to change the rules about incentives for doctors who diagnose ADHD. They do give money to the clinicians or the doctors who were involved in diagnosing ADHD, but they didn't try to attempt any sort of change, or they didn't try to attempt to change the rules associated with it. So option C is also wrong. Option D says, drug companies have encouraged the APA to rush through changes to the criteria for diagnosing ADHD. Again, something which is not mentioned anywhere. Drug companies didn't encourage APA to rush through changes. No information. So that's also not given. Question number 21. In the final paragraph, the word trademark refers to. It's kind of an easy one, and here the answer is A. As we go through the paragraph, we can see this brings us to the issue of addictive nature of ADHD medication. As Dr. Soul asserts, addiction to stimulant medication isn't rare, it is common. Just observe many patients periodically seeking an increased dosage as their powers of concentration diminish. This is because the body stops producing the appropriate levels of neurotransmitters that ADHD drug replace, a trademark of addictive substance. So whenever people do have these addictive substances, they do make certain kind of physiological reactions because of which they get addicted to that, and they need more dosage of that particular drug in order to cope with the present requirement. So answer for question number 21 is pretty easy, and that's A, physiological reaction. Question number 22, the last one. It says in the final paragraph, what does the writer imply about addiction to ADHD medication? Here the answer is C, which says insufficient attention seemed to have paid to it. As we go through the paragraph, you may see much has been written about the staggering increase in opioid overdoses and abuse of prescription painkillers in the USA, but abuse of drugs used to treat ADHD is no less a threat. So it can be a threat. While opioids are more lethal than prescription stimulants, there are parallels between the opioid epidemic and the increase in problems tied to stimulants. In the former, users switch from prescription narcotics to heroin and illicit fentanyl or illegal fentanyl. With ADHD drugs, patients are switching from legally prescribed stimulants to illicit ones such as methamphetamine and cocaine. The medication is particularly prone to abuse because people feel it improves their lives. These drugs are antidepressants, aid weight loss and improve confidence, and can be abused by students seeking to improve their focus on or academic performance. So more work needs to be done. Now this is the area we need to know. More work needs to be done before we can settle the questions surrounding the diagnosis and treatment of ADHD. So it means not enough work has been done to answer the questions surrounding the diagnosis and treatment, which is the same idea that we can see in option C. Insufficient attention seems to have paid to it. Paid to it means paid to the addiction of ADHD medication, which can be related to the treatment of medication. So answer is C. Option A says it is unlikely to turn into a problem or on the scale of that caused by opioid abuse. Opioid abuse, here you may see that much has been written about the staggering increase in opioid overdoses, and here you may see opioids are more lethal than prescription stimulants, but still there are parallels between opioid epidemic and the increase in problems tied to stimulants. And here you may see when it comes to opioids, users may switch from prescription narcotics to heroin and illicit fentanyl, and ADHD. With the case of ADHD drugs, patients may switch from legally prescribed stimulants to illicit ones such as methamphetamine and cocaine. So both can be the problem. Anyways, writer is not implying about this thing, and he is not stating that, he is not trying to imply that ADHD medication, addiction to ADHD medication is unlikely to turn into a problem on the scale that caused by opioid abuse. So option A is wrong. Option B says the effects are more marked in certain sectors of the population, which is completely irrelevant. No information, that's totally not given. Option D says reasons for it are not yet fully understood. It might not be or might not yet fully understood by the writer is clearly suggesting that not enough work has been done in this area. If they had done, or if they had given sufficient attention to questions, these questions could have been answers, and that's what writer is trying to imply. So more attention is sufficient in this area. So answer is C. If you liked this video, please let me know about it through the comments, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe. You may click the bell icon to get prompt updates. Thank you for watching.